I am Craig Allen. I'm a creative director, and I look like Katie Lang and Justin Bieber had a baby with Dave Grohl. I'm also lucky enough to have one of the greatest teachers I ever had, Deborah Morrison, here in the room with me. She taught me everything I know.
And I am Jess Monsey. As a woman, I'm uncomfortable with you all scrutinizing my appearance. However, I was given this as an alter ego by one of my creative directors years ago. This is a dark Naga. It's a monster from the D&D monster manual, and it can read minds and eats people's souls as part of it.
Talk about brass balls.
There you go.
That's it. We're here to talk about Everybody Wins, partnerships that lead to great work. We already said we work on Old Spice.
Yeah. So actually, this is a good lead-in. Craig and I have worked together on Old Spice for 7 years. And one of the questions that everybody always asks us, unanimously, is how on earth do we get our clients to buy the work that we try to sell them? And the truth of the matter is there's no silver bullet. There's no magic formula that we base all of our presentations around. But what it does all come down to is partnerships. And I'll tell you one thing, it's really interesting to me that it dawned on me as I was sitting here. We actually gave this presentation a couple of months ago in Phoenix at a creative summit. But I majored in marketing at St. John's University. I'm one of the only people at Wieden and Kennedy who actually has a marketing degree. I find that fascinating. And no one, and it's not to bash St. John's because I actually got an amazing education there, but no one ever talked to me about what the real experience working in ad agency was going to be like. And advertising is a team sport. Not only within the walls of an agency do you have to collaborate with people really well, but we're in a service industry, so you have to know how to work with clients. And personally, I feel like not enough training or focus goes into explaining to people how these partnerships should work, again, internally and externally. But also, ad agencies are kind of notoriously bad at training people around these topics. So this is kind of an interesting presentation because it's not meant for you guys, but it's meant for the people that you're teaching, and maybe there's stuff in here that you could share with them or maybe even build a curriculum around. Because this is the truth. The stronger your partnerships are, the better the work will be. And everybody wants to make great work if they go into advertising.
So us versus them, it's often if you're not making great work, it's because the relationship is broken internally or externally, and usually both. There's kind of you're coming out of school, and even at UT where I went, you kind of choose the creative path or you choose the account path or the media path or whatever. So you're kind of segmented in the beginning, and there's a couple classes that mix it together. But it just, if you start, you kind of go in, I went into advertising being okay, it's agency versus client, and it's account people versus creative, and we're all kind of trying to coexist, which is the exact opposite way, right, to think. Because if you think that way, you don't get anywhere. Everybody kind of hates each other. You're battling all the time. You're not focusing on the work. You're just battling. So no production is made. So us versus them is a horrible mentality, but it's all too common. So how can you, the people you teach, be someone that people want to work with? And what we realized, we found some Bible verses. We think, be normal and cool to others, and they will be normal and cool to you, which we didn't fact check this, but we think it's Genesis 8:14. And even a better verse was, don't be a freaking douche, Jude 1:18. And this whole presentation, what we realized as we went through it, it's just about being a good, normal human to each other, to your clients, to each other internally. If you can just be cool and human, everything works better. It's more fun. It's easier to make good work. So that's kind of what this is all about.
So there's just some specific lessons that we've learned that, again, I think are helpful context for people going into this industry. The first one is about empathy. So sharing ideas makes you very vulnerable. Being in a creative environment, there's a lot of vulnerability and a lot of heartbreak, and it's difficult. Whether you're an account person or a creative, it is an emotionally trying industry to be in. As an account person, you feel like you're getting shit, forgive my language, slung at you from all sides. As a creative, you feel like you're putting your hopes and dreams out there and people are squashing them all the time. So Mark Fitzloff, who is our ECD, and I were having a conversation about empathy, and he talked about this metaphor of the hole. And he's like, sympathy is when you're walking past a hole and you see somebody down in there and you're like, oh man, that sucks for you. You're in the hole. Hope you get out of there. And then you walk away. Empathy is seeing your friend in the hole and crawling down into the hole with them and being like, man, we are in the hole together. Let's figure out how to get out. And that's always stuck with me. So when you're working with people, whether it's a client or a creative or an account person, if you want to get the best work and you want to have the best partnerships, figuring out how to sit in the hole with somebody else and look at things from their perspective, I think this has a lot to do with the conversation you were just having prior to this too, by the way. Having that feeling of true empathy when you're trying to work with a team in a collaborative environment is really important.
Be honest and willing to listen. Teams don't work well when parts of that team feel like things are being hidden from them. And no good work comes from a team when there's parts of it that don't feel like they can trust each other. So that's the being honest part. And the willing to listen is just like everybody just wants to be heard. So even from a junior media person to your partner, if you're creative, if you can just like sit with them and acknowledge them, even if you don't agree with it, just acknowledge and listen to them and say, hey, maybe I could be wrong on this one, goes a long way, and people feel more valuable, and it tends to work better. I think, especially if you can't be honest internally, you got big problems. I can understand maybe you want to sugarcoat some things when you go talk to clients, but if you're keeping things internally and you're having separate meetings, I don't remember, Jess would always be in the room, even when we weren't quite sure about the work, we would talk about that in front of Jess, which I think is not very common, which is a bummer.
Leading with enthusiasm. So this is important for people who you particularly want, I think, to go into either planning or account management or who aim to be creative directors. When you're reviewing work and maybe there's issues with it, but the first thing out of your mouth is negativity, negativity, negativity. Again, it's people's hopes and dreams being squished, and it just sets everything, the bad tone for everything. But if you're reviewing work for the first time and you say, guys, here's all the stuff that I love about this, or thank you for putting in a whole weekend's worth of work on something at the last minute because the client changed a brief. Like saying something that is either positive or acknowledges how much work went into it before you start chipping away at the work, and like it just makes an enormous amount of difference. But again, these are soft skills that people don't get trained on, and they really, really, really make a difference in the real work environment on a day-to-day.
Especially as a creative or young, fragile, made of glass people. And you come in expecting to be crapped on or being told what's wrong with the things. And it's because it is true. Jess was always really good about this. She knew how to work the beast. She would come in and be like, say something nice right off the bat, which kind of sets you off immediately. You're like, oh, okay. And then when she would crap on it, then we were able to, it was easier to take the crap. But usually it was good. Shooting holes together so the client can't shoot them, This is a classic Wieden and Kennedy saying, walk in stupid every morning, which they show you all the rules when you come in, and I was like, yeah, whatever. But it actually is a really important one. It kind of boils down to no one likes a know-it-all and no one knows it all, and it's very easy. I feel like I could think when I first got into advertising, I don't even know how I got my first job. Went into advertising and I just pretended to know everything because I didn't want to get fired, and I didn't know anything. I knew how to concept, but making commercial was not a lot of what was covered. So you'd start right away, and I remember being at telecine, which I didn't even know how to say that word for a long time, which is coloring the film. I went with my creative directors, and they were asking me all these questions, and I was like, yeah, oh, of course, yeah. We should definitely put a window on his face. That's obvious, right? So, but just not being afraid to speak up and say, I don't understand or I don't know. If I would have done that, I probably would have learned so much quicker. But it's like, especially being a student, I think that I wish I would have known that better, because I would have learned quicker than just trying to fake it till I made it kind of thing. So walking stupid every morning, it's good. It seems like it should be a negative, but it's a very good big positive.
Okay. And these are just some
I don't know why that
specific
guy's
things. These are
That's
just
a leftover picture, I think.
specific things. That looks like a guy I want to buy work from. Anyway, these are some specific things above and beyond what we just talked about, which kind of apply to everybody no matter what, but that we've learned about working with our clients that they really appreciate. So the first one is getting into our client's business in a really deep way. Our most successful work relationships, advertising, comes from those relationships where we have true business partnerships. Old Spice is a testament to that. Like, we are literally designing products with them that will go on the shelf. Nearly every product you see from Old Spice on the shelf right now has been designed in some way, shape, or form by Wyden and Kennedy in conjunction with them. And that's been true for like the last 6 years. So when you really understand a client's business, they let you in deeper. When they let you in deeper, you have greater opportunities to do even more amazing work. When you really know their business, they trust you more. They're more likely to lean in with you on things that, ordinarily might seem crazy, but because you took the time to know their business so well, they trust you more, that you have their best interests in heart. So I can't stress this enough, how important I think really understanding a client's business is.
And that goes right into selling stuff, especially as a young kid coming in. You should care about if your work is actually selling things. When it is selling things, everything is so much easier. I don't know what the run is, but we've pretty much increased Old Spice sales like every quarter for like the last 7 years. And when you do that, they're okay to take risks and they're willing to do crazier stuff. So when you ask, how do you sell that work? Well, the product's sold. And when you're like selling out of products, they tend to trust you more. So when we come in, especially when you can say, hey, you were a little worried about this piece of advertising, but you sold out of the product. And then the next time we're like, yeah, remember, it's kind of like that. They're like, oh, well, that seemed to work. So, and even as a creative, asking, hey, did that work? Did we sell products to the client? They cannot believe that you care about that. So they think you're just trying to win awards. And when you prove that you actually want it to work, it goes a long way. And they buy better stuff. And everything works easier when it's selling.
So I had this epiphany a couple of years ago, I can't even remember, where we were 2 years out from the launch of a campaign. 2 years out. And we were in the very early stages of creative development. And our client was like deeply upset about the fact that we had to push a creative meeting by about a week. And this made no sense to me because we were literally 2 years away from this thing ever seeing the light of day. And I was like, what is going on? Like, maybe I should just ask if there's something that I don't have transparency to, because this seems odd, And I discovered through my investigation that the reason why it was so upsetting is because my client's bonuses and promotability were actually based on her ability to meet specific deadlines that were outlined by our company. And then I was like, holy shit. Like, if I was in that situation, this would be really bad. Like, I would, but we weren't thinking along those lines because we were just thinking about the work. And the end of the tale is that we still missed the meeting, but what we decided to do, we didn't have work for the meeting, but what we decided to do was have a check-in, like a tissue session, where we just said, this is where we are, this is where we're struggling with, which counted against the timeline. Like, just the fact that we had a conversation counted against the timeline. And from that moment forward, I always told my team basically this: don't let little things get in the way of big things. Like, understand that things like timing and budgets are the livelihood of some of our clients. Not because they personally are sticklers for timing and budgets, but because they're held accountable to things. And if we can find ways to make sure that we're not upsetting people in those little ways, we can have a healthy relationship that'll lead us to do the work that we want to do. But when you start messing with people's livelihood in ways that you don't fully understand, it just becomes toxic, and they don't want to listen to your ideas, and then they're less likely to be responsive to you when you're trying to push back on something. So anyway.
Pick and choose your battles. This is mainly about how to deal with a client, but it also works for creative partnerships, I think. Just the give and take is healthy, and then identifying when you go in what you're willing to compromise on and what is key to the success of the commercial. We did a spot recently for Old Spice. Actually, we shot it 2 years ago, but it came out in January with a rocket car that was like driving across the desert. And I remember the original designs were like a blue stripe going down the rocket car, and the client asked if it could be red. And we were like, oh, it's ruined. This is crap. What happened? And then we looked at it, and I still think about that to this day. I'm like, no one even cares. No one's like, man, this would have been good if that stripe wasn't red on the rocket car. So like,
but they fought over it.
But we fought over it. But like, this is ongoing lessons that even we're still learning, guys. But just identifying that, because I mean, at the end of the spot, he explodes. So like, in hindsight, like they're letting a dude blow up. Maybe the rocket car can have a red stripe on it, you know? So just that picking and choosing your battles, and even internally with partners, I think you always like want to have the best work to show to your CDs or whoever it may be. But like if something's truly passionate to someone, just being like willing to go with them on that goes a long way, because, you know, every partnership, it's like a marriage. You see them more. I see my partner until he quit a couple weeks ago. I used to see my partner as more than I saw my family and my wife. So it is like a weird relationship. And like he'd be like, I could tell he's really passionate. So I'd say, hey, clearly you like this idea. Why don't we present it? I don't love it, but let's do it. So that made it healthier for us. And sometimes when we see work from teams, it's not the best thing ever, but we'll keep it around because we can tell, hey, they're super passionate about it. Instead of just stomping on it, you just say, hey, why don't we put this to the side? We like it, but let's keep going. And then they usually end up beating it anyways. So picking and choosing your battles goes a long way to making a healthy internal and external relationship.
So research is like a dirty word sometimes at Wyden & Kennedy. Oh, well, people think it is. They always think, oh, Wyden & Kennedy, you don't like to do research. I think the thing is we don't like to do certain types of research. So what I would tell anybody who is at least wanting to work at a place like Wyden is that there is very good types of research, and then there are the types of research that we think are like anathema, like they just kill really great ideas. But when you do the right types of research, you have really well-informed gut instincts. You write a brief that, as long as you hit the brief on the head, you're going to solve the business problem, but you have a creative sandbox that you can play in that's as big as all get out. And also, you know, I always say to my team, you can't beat a system you don't understand. So, like, how could you ever win the game if you don't know what you're dealing with? So there are types of research that are really, really important. It's just identifying those types that are the most informative and helpful.
As a creative, it took me a long time to be okay with this slide and this thinking. But it is true. You know, we'll talk to the moderators of the research and make sure that it's tailored so it's not evaluating, is this ad funny, let's say, but is this communicating that we have a new deodorant that smells like sand or whatever it may be. So if it is doing that, we use it to our advantage a lot too, because if it passes that testing, they go, we're still not sure about it. You can say it is doing with flying colors exactly what you're setting out to do. Let us leave the rest of it to us. Leave us to the rest of the communication. So it can work. Don't say that will never work unless you know it will never work. This is like a simple, easy thing, but it's the easiest way to look like an idiot to the clients, like especially when they say, hey, couldn't we cut this out, this scene out here? And you're like, no, that would ruin it. And then they're like, well, can we just see it? And then you show it to them, and you cut it, and you're like, oh, crap, it actually does work. Like, we screwed up. Like, now we got to show it to them, and they just are like, you're an idiot, and they never trust you again. So we found key things to say, like, let us think about that, or let us try some things and come back to you. And it's amazing how well those work, because you say, we're not sure that's going to work, but hey, who knows? Let us try it. And then we go try it, and if it doesn't, we're like, yeah, it didn't work out. And they seem to let it go much easier than if you just say, that won't ever work. That was a stupid comment that you just said.
How can you know if you never try?
That's what she says every time.
That's what the account person always says.
Yeah. I know we're trying to hurry, so.
Oh, this is just, oh my gosh. Arguing, especially if you don't have a good argument. Again, I hope you guys understand, like, when people come into advertising agencies, they really don't know this stuff. And they just assume, like, creativity is always right or whatever. And then they find themselves in these, like, downward spirals of arguments where they don't actually have a point or they're not making it really well. And it continues to dig a hole for them. Even if you feel passionately about something, sometimes it's better to just step away, construct your argument, and then come back into the room and duke it out, having prepared your thoughts. But we have these like trigger fingers where we hear something we don't like on a conference call with a client, and it's like, I got to get this out of my system right now. And nobody has really had the discussion with those folks to say, you're doing yourself a disservice. This is a terrible way to argue. You know? So again, I think all of these things are like, seem like total common sense, but they're not actually being trained in people.
I'd say that's the number one thing as a creative director, and I'm sure, Jason, you can attest to this too, is it's hard enough, right, for you guys to teach how to concept. Like, that's an impossible ask. That's very hard that you learn, and I'm still learning. So it's very rarely that every junior creative that comes in, they know how to come up with ideas, but they don't know how to sell them. So I think that what we're trying to do here is supply a little bit of that thinking, because the main thing, we had a young creative one time talking about relationships. He came in and he would be like, anything that Jess and the team would say, he would, in front of them, roll his eyes like, oh, God. And then we'd go out and he'd be like, man, freaking account team, am I right? Like, saying stuff all the time, like, ugh. And we had to like really work with him and like, dude, the Jess was like, what's wrong with this kid? I don't want to work with him. Like, can we move him to another team? You know, and so we worked it out with him. But like those small things, I was like, dude, don't you understand? They're trying to help you. Like, these questions, you forgot to write the product into the spot. Like, it's kind of important. Like,
there's often ridiculous things like that.
Yeah, it's like,
happen.
And I was like, they're trying to help you. They're on your side. So it's like, it's that thing is what we are challenged with junior creatives. It's usually not, I mean, it still is actually concepting, but teaching them how to come up with good ideas. But then the selling is a completely different art. And if you can come up with the best ideas, but if you don't know how to sell them, or your account team hates you, they're not going to work hard to sell it, which is like, that's the biggest thing you learn, I think, in the first 3 years. You're like, oh man, you know what's really important? We had to work with our creatives a lot. The strategic paragraph before your campaign, super important. And they'd be like, oh God, I have to write this dumb thing. You're like, dude, that might sell your whole campaign. Like, you need to go work on this and craft it and say all the right things in there before. You should sell your campaign before you present the script or whatever the idea is. So I think that's the main thing that, coming from a junior creative to now an old creative like myself, is that I've seen is that it's the selling. I'm super old, guys. The last one is super simple, but have fun. One thing that was always surprising to me was we just have a lot of fun on our team. We're always laughing. We're always making jokes. And I'd have creatives come up to us all the time, some of the best creatives in the agency, and like, hey, how can I work on your accounts? Because you guys are always laughing. Like, I'm in meetings over here, and everybody's mad and arguing, and you guys are always laughing and having fun. How can I get into your group? So, like, one way you get good work is you attract the best creatives to your group. And if you're having fun, the work shows it. So, you know, we're always laughing. And usually the way that I know that we have a good spot is I present it to Jess, and she laughs and looks away, and she goes, oh no. And she's laughing. That means yes.
I'll laugh so hard I cry. It's
yeah.
Really
so it's
embarrassing.
Like, so, I mean, it's just when you see that, it's like infectious. So just if you're having fun, the work shows it, as simple as that is. And thanks. These legs are fine, guys.